My name is Will McCastle. I am an astrologer, have been for many years, and this is going to be my take on mundane astrology, surrounding many questions regarding the United States, as well as some future events, political matters. We're going to talk a little bit about elections and a few other things at this time. So I think that it may be best that we begin talking about the United States. And we're first going to visit the chart of the United States and give some general overviews or some understandings of themes that we'll probably see evolving here over the next decade, maybe in the United States. So give me a moment while I pull up the chart of the United States. Okay, so here we are using the chart of the United States with a birth time of July 4th, 1776, 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, PA. And this is the date of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And what we have in this inner wheel is the chart of the United States. And what we have in this outer wheel here is where the planets are currently in the United States, or at least in the with regards to transits to the chart of the United States. And so there are a couple of things that really stand out here and really sort of set the tone for the next couple of years as it pertains to the future of the United States. One of the matters that we're facing is the Pluto-Pluto conjunction that we find in the second house of the United States. And with this conjunction, we would imagine that this is going to be a very powerful time, a time of significant transformation within the United States. This transformation is more than likely going to surround the economy of the United States and how the economy is actually structured. And so we may see some major shifts and changes in this regard. This conjunction becomes exact in 2022. And so 2022 looks like a year of major change within the economy of the United States. It also could potentially bring about some significant power struggles surrounding the value system of the United States and how we go forward in making these changes to our economy. The second thing that stands out to me as I look at this chart and the transits of where they are is seeing Neptune here at the end or towards the end of the third house. It's interesting. It's Neptune at the end of the third house. We've seen this only maybe two other times in the history of the United States. No, I want to say we've only seen this one other time in the history of the United States. And this, where we see Neptune right now, so it sort of coincides with where we saw Neptune around 1856. Okay, in 1856, there was an election, and it was really the election prior to the one where we saw Abraham Lincoln being elected, and it really was the election that we saw prior to Lincoln's election and then the start of the Civil War. And what I find very interesting is that around the time of the start of the Civil War, and I believe that that was, let me just go to that date. Let me double check my records. I want to make sure that I am correct on the date, but I believe it was at least the month of April of 1861. Okay, so around 61, and just let me verify that that is the start of the Civil War. Okay, so what you'll notice here is that on April 12th of 1861, we had Neptune actually at the Ima Coli, or the entrance to the fourth house of the United States. And I think that this is very important. One of the reasons is because having Neptune at the entrance of the fourth house, first of all, the fourth house of any nation is going to be the house of its homeland. And it's going to be the house of how it sees itself as a homeland and how it sees, how we see one another as citizens. And with Neptune, we're talking about an energy. On one hand, it is an energy of confusion. It can be an energy that is, regarding subterfuge. It does hold energy of those who may be disadvantaged. But on the more positive side, Neptune holds an energy of compassion as well. And it is an energy that wishes to take care of those who are unable to take care of themselves. But what we see here is that Neptune's energy becomes very strong as it enters into the fourth house, creating some degree of confusion and maybe even some confusion as to who we are as a nation, or what makes us strong, or what are our maybe not so much values, but how do we see ourselves? Okay, and so this is a very important time that will arise again within the next 4 years, in fact, here in the United States. So if we go back to where we are now, and we just advance this chart to say, give it 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we see Neptune right there back at the gates of the fourth house. And so I think that what that is going to cause initially is some degree of confusion, and maybe even the possible dissolution, or the dissolving, if you will, of certain aspects of our nation. And so, during the Civil War, right after the election of Lincoln, we start to see many of the states that would make up the Confederacy begin to secede from the Union. And so in that point, Neptune was definitely bringing some degree of dissolving energy to the strength of the Union. And so this is potentially something that we could see transpiring over the next 4 years. And so that's definitely something that we want to pay attention to as the elections arise. I think two major issues that were taking place at the onset of the Civil War that we sort of see coming back into play for this time. One of the issues was the issue of slavery, of course, surrounding the the onset of the Civil War, and how slavery would be held as an institution throughout the nation, especially within the newer states. And so we see mostly African Americans who were designated as slaves during that time, probably being obviously a part of that disenfranchised population. But also too, with Neptune being there, there was definitely a question of, as a country, how do we stand united? I think another big issue there that we also see today is this sort of power struggle, if you will, between the federal government and state governments, and this sort of disagreement, if you will. And I think that is going to be something that sort of percolates to the surface more so during the elections, the midterm elections of 2022 and the presidential elections of 2024. Okay, so I think that is something that we definitely want to keep an eye on. Now, one of the the interesting things here, if we go back to the time of the Civil War, okay, so back to 1861, I believe our date was the 12th, April 12th of 1861. If we just go by the year, if you will, we have the Civil War, which goes until about April of 1865. Okay, and we see Neptune well into the fourth house. It was in 1866 where we see the United States, sort of getting involved in the first civil rights legislation, and I believe that was the Civil Rights Bill of 1866. And if you just follow Neptune as it courses through the fourth house, as we start to get Neptune towards the end of the fourth house, as we start to get into, say, 1874, 1875, this is actually around the time where you actually see the last civil rights legislation being enacted. Until the civil rights bills that were enacted during the 1950s. And so this journey of Neptune through the fourth house seems to be a time where the nation was dealing with sort of a confusion as to what we are, okay, and what we represent. What is the foundational foundational ideology of our nation, right? And there were steps taken compassionate steps taken to take care of those who are considered disenfranchised within our population. And so it is my thinking as to giving, looking at history as a context. I think that what you're liable to see here going forward, with these next, say, 4 years being very important years, but also years that I think that are going to be steeped in conflict between differing ideologies. But as we get beyond that 4-year point, and as Neptune slips into the fourth house, I think that we need to be very conscious of the challenges that face our nation, the potential dissolving of our union. Is one of the potential problems. States sort of separating themselves from sort of the federal model, or the direction in which the federal government wants to go, could be another issue as well. You know, almost this disagreement, if you will, based on class, where we have upper and lower classes that are clashing. Think protests of Occupy Wall Street and around that time. But what I think you'll see in the coming decade or so, as Neptune courses through the fourth house, and this is going to take us to probably about 2038, 2039, you are going to see probably more of a concerted effort to assist those who are considered the modern day disenfranchised class. And it very well could be that we see this modern day class incorporate more people than, say, just African Americans. But I really do feel that this is going to incorporate more of the lower classes of the United States. Those who are definitely outside of the, say, 1%. And so you could definitely see a lot of legislation going forward in order to assist those who may occupy that class.
Oh, no, let me ask this. The Civil War after the 2024 election, are you really seeing something equivalent to a civil war with general unrest and states breaking away, fed up with the results of the election?
The likelihood is very strong. And I think that's a great question. And let me pull up the chart of the United States to show you why I think that the potential for actual conflict is kind of there. Let's see here. And going back to, say, April 12th of 1861. In 1861, and at the onset of the Civil War, we see Neptune, at the beginning of the fourth house here. By the following year, we're about a year into the war, and maybe, I don't even say following year, maybe a few months into the Civil War, what we see is this energy of Mars entering into the fourth house. Now, during that period of time, Mars did retrograde through the fourth house, so it spent a little bit more time in the fourth house. I think Mars, which is an energy of war, okay, anytime it goes through the fourth house, you want to be cautious of any type of domestic unrest, potential for, anything from, say, fire to say, a terrorist attack, what have you. But it was during this time in the history of the United States. It was like, say, it was actually in September when it took place. But this journey of of Mars through the fourth house, back during the Civil War, and again, just to highlight, it was going through a retrograde. But this brought forward the still what's today the bloodiest battle in American military history, and that's the Battle of Antietam, which took place in September of 1862. And that presence of having Mars, not only in the fourth house, but also with its presence sort of near and dear to Neptune, I think does bring about, some questions as to what kind of civil unrest could occur around or after the 2024 elections. Now, bringing it to the 2024 election. So here we are in the 2024 election. We see Mars way out here, but what we'll notice is that so what we're seeing here more so in 2024, and this isn't necessarily around the elections, but this is more so in the spring of 2024, is we see a reintroduction of Mars and that Neptune energy as well. And this is definitely around the time where the elections are going to be sort of getting underway, where candidates are going to be definitely, out there on the campaign trail. We're going to have election events. So, I think one of the things that you're going to want to, look at here is this energy that's percolating during the course of the election season. Also, one of the things that I saw towards the around the 2024 election is that Donald Trump's progressed moon will be square Pluto. And this is an indication that there could be some harsh emotions that percolate after the election of 2024. So I would imagine that if he does run and if he does lose, we could potentially see some of the same behaviors, or maybe even a little bit more frustration from out of the results of the election around that time. Actual conflict. Now let me also bring this up as well, because I didn't speak about this as of yet. What we see back around the time of the Civil War. I mentioned that Neptune going through the fourth house. We saw that this was an energy of a nation wanting to live up to its ideals, and also showing compassion for disenfranchised people. And again, this starts with the Civil War. But what's interesting is when we visit Neptune on its rise up through the chart, and it actually revisits this line, but in opposition. Okay, and so that actually takes us to, let's just go to the year of 19. I'm just going to shoot for 37. Okay, so that's not quite it, but. Well, we would definitely figure that the United States was involved in World War II at this time, and the disenfranchised people that were being addressed were not people on the home front, as it were, back during the Civil War, but this would have been people who would have been, say, out in the world, and this was definitely, saving the Jews during the Holocaust, and the destruction, that was taking place during World War II. This sort of needing to live by one's ideals and needing to sort of stand up on behalf of the disenfranchised does seem to come with this theme of war, and prior to war, some degree of confusion. And so with the Civil War, there was this confusion as to how we would approach slavery, which led to sort of this, war mobilization. I think that during World War II, it was a confusion about our stance as sort of the people seeing the United States in this sort of isolationist position, and not really feeling as though the problems of nations halfway around the world were the United States problems. But then having to sort of galvanize after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and move into this sort of place of being the vanguard, if you will, for those who were disenfranchised at that time. So I think that the potential for war is heightened, for sure. So that is a general take on where the United States is going. I want to now address matters surrounding the midterms, where things get somewhat interesting, because as I mentioned before, and the midterms are actually, let me give the actual places on the actual date of the midterm. So the midterm is going to be November 8th of 2022. And the things that stand out to me around that time are really just this Pluto coming into a full conjunction throughout the year of 2022. And so, if there is going to be any type of power struggles, significant power struggles that we see taking place, especially with regards over infrastructure, how infrastructure is going to be done, anything surrounding the restructuring of the economy. I think that this is what the 2022 midterms is really going to be focused on, is really how we go back, rebuilding the economy. What is it going to look like? Rebuilding it for those who may not have had a lot of success in 2020 with the increase in the markets. But there's going to be a lot of debate, if you will, as to how we go forward as a nation. And really, I think the debate has already started. Who's going to pay for it? So that's going to, I think, be a big issue in the midterm elections. I think that by the time that we get to the presidential election of 2024, this is going. I laugh because it's hard to envision the scenario, the outcome. But
3 quick questions before we go to the next broad topic.
Sure.
Based on what I've heard, you're implying that you think the Republicans will take the 2022 election, because if they lose again, Donald Trump is history.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a fight. One of the interesting sort of markers for me that I'm putting up for the midterm election is sort of get a sense of where it's going to go. If you see Kamala Harris rising to more of a position of prominence during the 2022 midterms, and if it's sort of assumed, or at least it's perceived, that the outcome of the midterms is really falling at on her at her feet, or based on her efforts, the likelihood that the Republicans could have a strong showing in the midterms is likely. We really could see the presidential elections of 2024 unfolding very similar to the presidential elections of 1860, where you could really lead into sort of this internal battle, something close to a civil war, if you will, based on the results of that election. And so going to the date of November 5th of 2024, this is where we see the planet of Neptune coming within 3 degrees of the entrance into the 4th house of the Ema Coli. And so I think that this is going to be an election to watch. I do think that elections are going to be not more peaceful, but a little bit more brutal, if you will, a little more contentious, a little bit more intense, and a little bit more having the okay, I don't know if the elections are we can say the elections actually divide the people, but it definitely is going to be a time in our nation where we're going to see the clear divide in ideologies within our country around the midterm elections, and certainly around the presidential election of 2024. A few things to be said, because I don't think that you can really talk about the course of a nation and how it goes without really discussing the leaders of that nation, the power players, if you will. And when you understand what's going on with the leadership of a nation, it becomes a little easier to understand the course that the nation is going to take. So give me one moment, and I'm going to pull up the chart of Joe Biden. I'm going to pull up 2 charts for Joe Biden. I'm going to pull up progress chart, secondary progress chart for Joe Biden. I also want to pull up a transit chart for Joe Biden as well. Okay, so a few things as it pertains to Joe Biden's chart and where we are now. One of my takeaways this time from studying Joe Biden's chart was that definitely Joe Biden is a liberal for sure. He is you know, sort of put in this position, if you will, to take care of the people, to fight for the people. I think that that is his intent. But again, I want to reiterate that Joe Biden is not the most comfortable leader. Um, and I think that, but I think that he'll be effective up into a point. One of the questions that I have as I look at this chart is the question of whether Joe Biden is going to finish his first term. Okay, I see Joe Biden as more of a one-term president. I do not see. I think it's very unlikely that Joe Biden will run in 2024. Um, if Joe Biden runs in 2024, it is a good chance that he will not. Um, I don't want to say he won't win, but he won't be a president for a full second term. The likelihood here, more of what I am sort of seeing here, is that at some point during the first 4 years of the Biden administration, um, that the torch, whether in the eyes of the public or behind the scenes, will be passed to Kamala Harris. In fact, I think that the rise of Kamala Harris is really the biggest story that come out of my studies as I look at these charts, as I look at the midterm as well as the presidential elections, even as I look at what's taking place with Donald Trump. I think that the emergence of Kamala Harris and with the strong potential that she not only assumes greater responsibility in her role as vice president over the country, but it's most likely that she will have a very good shot at winning the presidential election of 2024. And I'm kind of seeing this potentially boiling down to, say, a Kamala Harris and Donald Trump scenario. So we'll see. We'll see. There's some questions regarding Donald Trump's run. A lot of that has to do more so with his, where he is at in his personal life, and how that affects his public life. But we'll get to that here in a moment. I want to continue on with Joe Biden. A few things about Joe Biden, I think, that are something to watch out for. When we look at his transiting chart, his transiting planets, we'll see Saturn starting to enter into Joe Biden's third house. Now, the third house is one of thought and communication. It is one where many people will deal with matters surrounding speech, thought, communication. Third house is a house of communicative activities. And so, we would expect that as Saturn enters into the third house, Joe Biden would start to maybe present some challenges in this area. Also, at the same time, he's going to have the planet of Uranus moving into his sixth house. The sixth house is a house of work, routine, and health. And Uranus is more so a planet of independence and freedom. And so when this happens, there can be sort of a desire to have more freedom from our daily responsibilities, from the work that we have to do, almost an irritation, if you will, with the doldrums of everyday work. This could also be a time too where we see some changes in the area of health. Now, what we'll see here in a few months is that in a few months, maybe in about a month, or by the time we get into, say, June, July, the summer, we'll start to see the planet Uranus opposite his Mars in the chart. At the same time, Saturn is going to be square his Mars. Mars is a planet of action, it's a planet of energy. And so the question becomes here, how is he utilizing his energy? With the presence of Uranus, which is very much an energy of action and change and quick and sudden movements, and Saturn, which is more of a energy of limitation, we get this sort of stop-start energy. And we also get this energy of someone who may be accident prone as well. So I would definitely say that throughout 2021, Joe Biden needs to be very careful about how he's utilizing his energy. He needs to be paying attention to any, say, first signs or traces or issues surrounding his health as well. His vitality, his energy levels, we may see that fluctuate. We could see any series of potential injuries, such as a broken bone, to something more such as such as high blood pressure. But regardless, I think that here, at least in the second half of 2021, you may start to see, or at least those around Biden may start to see the first signs that there may be some health challenges that need to be focused on and taken a little bit more serious as the years go on. Now, one of the sort of matters that becomes an issue as we move into 2022, we would imagine that 2022 would be a time where, Biden would be required to sort of be on the campaign trail and then really pushing forward the agenda for the Democrats. But again, I just don't know if 2022 is going to provide him with the opportunity in which to do that. I do still think that his health is going to be fairly well enough, but I don't know if we in 2022 see him maybe start to take more of a back seat, and 2022 becomes more of a time where we see Kamala Harris stepping to the fore. What I'm seeing in 2022 is that Kamala Harris takes on a growing degree of popularity. And so it gives me the feeling, at least, that she is more so on the campaign trail and trying to boost Democratic efforts in that way. Now, the likelihood that Joe Biden sees a full 4 years, I think, is strongly challenged by the fact that as we get into, say, 2022 and then into more so 2023, we're going to see Uranus starting to make more of an opposition with Mercury in Biden's chart. And so again, I feel as though this is going to, and with Saturn in the third house, this is really going to challenge him in the area of being able to get his message across. And it may even trigger some health challenges that at this time may become a little bit more noticeable to the public, if you will, seeing as though Mercury is the ruler of his 10th house, which is the house of reputation, also the house of the public. And so I think that you may have more of a move to, say, push Kamala Harris to the forefront. Now, I'm going to take a moment to pull up Kamala Harris's chart and just describe, just sort of talk about what I'm seeing here. Now, I think one of the significant things as we look at Kamala's chart is the presence of Jupiter as well as Saturn in her 9th house. I look at Jupiter in her 9th house as being a prelude to Jupiter actually going into her 10th house. We'll see Jupiter spend the majority of 2022 within Kamala Harris's 10th house. The 10th house is a house of career. It is a house of public. It is a house of the outer world. Jupiter is a planet of growth, expansion, and good fortune. So this is definitely going to be a time of popularity for her. This is also the potential time where we see within people's lives a promotion, if you will. And so it's very well that we could see whether it's actually something that's stated or not. That's going to be a totally different question. But we are definitely probably going to see her promoted with additional responsibilities, throughout 2022. Now, the fact that she has Saturn in the 9th house, I think, is very important because it does show that she is approaching a time of heightened career success, but has yet to really hit her peak in that realm. And so what we're going to see here over the next few years, okay, is that by the time we get into, say, 2023, we'll actually see Saturn enter into her 10th house. And then as we get into 2024, yes, Saturn is deeper into the 10th house. It also has a conjunction with Chiron, which I think is very significant in relationship to Kamala Harris's journey. Kamala Harris's Chiron in the 10th house, and with it being in Pisces, gives me the feeling that um, leadership is, in a way, for her something that she may resist. But at the same time, it is a part of her karmic journey, a journey that she must take. And the reason being is because by her taking this karmic walk, it actually has an effect on the lives of so many other people, the spiritual lives of so many other people. So in a sense here, I really do think that it is sort of this. I don't want to say spiritual, but almost this destiny, if you will, for Kamala Harris to advance and to go a little bit further in her career. And I think the next step would be to the presidency. And I see that happening during the presidential election of 2024. Another reason being is because if we actually go to that date, which is November 5th, with this having Saturn still very much towards the beginning of the 10th house, it does show that place of being in a territory, if you will, astrological territory of heightened career success. Also, having Jupiter on the ascendant brings in a lot of popularity, a lot of support from her constituents. So I think that what you're seeing here is her being a sort of a formative opponent, someone who was, if she runs, the likelihood that she would be successful is extremely high. But I will say this, it is also very likely that should she become the president of the United States in 2024, or actually becoming the president in 2025, she is going to inherit a nation that is definitely within transformation and definitely challenged in understanding its identity at home. So, I don't know how the presidency ends. I haven't gone that far, and maybe that's a study for a later date. But I do think that this is a strong possibility, a strong outcome that we could potentially see, along with her inheriting a nation in turmoil. Okay. Now I want to take a moment to talk about Donald Trump and his either likely or unlikely rise again. Okay, so give me a moment while I pull up Donald Trump's chart. Now, there are a few things that I find rather interesting about Donald Trump's chart that I must admit even confused me. One of the things that confuses me is really his involvement with the 2022 midterm election. I do feel as though he has some degree of involvement, but almost a reluctant involvement. It's the reason I say that is because we're working with Neptune square his sun sign, which to me is an energy that is more of an energy of retreat, is more of an energy of someone who wants to be in the background. And even though we know Donald Trump not to be someone who necessarily enjoys being in the background, this energy does not support him necessarily wanting to be in the spotlight either. But I also would say we could read this energy in a very different way. With Neptune being in the seventh house being the house of relationship, also being the house of marriage. The feeling that I'm getting here by just looking at Donald Trump's chart, and I must admit, in full disclosure, I did not delve into Melania's chart. But the sense that I'm getting here, especially as we get more so closer to the elections of 2024, is that the relationship and matters surrounding Donald Trump's personal life may be a challenge to his presidential run in 2024. Okay. And then what I'm looking at here is Saturn in a sixth house now, but by the time we get to 2024, it will be occupying the beginning of the seventh house, which is the house of relationship. And if things are not necessarily going well in the relationship at that time, I would imagine that there would be some degree of challenge in the relationship. And I would also imagine that challenge could be surrounding a second presidential run. Now, a few things that I want to go back to 2022 and midterms 2022, where we are with where I think that there could be a degree of positive energy for Donald Trump as we look at the 2022 midterms, is that he's receiving some degree of harmonious energy from Neptune and Jupiter as it aligns with Venus. And Venus is a planet of love and beauty, has to say something about finances as well. But for Donald Trump, it's the ruler of his 10th house, which is the house of career, the outer world, the public. I am expecting for the 2022 midterms to bring Donald Trump some degree of popularity. In fact, I am expecting that that what takes place during the midterm elections will set up Republican support for the potential run of Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election. Okay. Another thing to keep an eye on that I think is very important is the decision on whether Donald Trump actually dives into the presidential election of 2024. If he does, I think that there is a real surprising argument that he would do very well in that election. A few things that sort of stand out to me as it pertains to Donald Trump's run for president in 2024. One of the things that stands out clearly is him also having Jupiter in the 10th house, like Kamala Harris would have in 2022. This does provide a lot of popularity if one knows how to manage the energies. And so same thing with Kamala. If these two individuals, while having Jupiter in the 10th house, become braggadocious or do things to spark the ire of the public, then the support that they would have otherwise enjoyed is going to turn against them, and they will not have that support. So this is not a time that you really want to go forward and necessarily be braggadocious or necessarily put people down, especially when you have good fortune. This is where I think that Donald Trump could have a problem. This is something that I would advise him against. This is also something that is going to be this restraint, if you will, is going to be something of a challenge to Donald Trump as well. I think that has to do with Uranus hanging around his midheaven. And so midheaven, this line here is a career point. We could see some real quick shifts in popularity. We could see some real quick shifts in career role. It's hard to say which way this is going to go. It could go certainly in a poor direction, or it could be one that goes in a very positive direction as well. Another thing that I think stands out to me here is that Uranus will also be in a sextile with Saturn and Venus, and that is the ruler of his 10th house. So that is very positive in the area of career. I think that even if Trump were to lose the presidential election of 2024, I think that he picks up a lot of support. I think that very well you could see him sort of regaining this mantle of his followers, strong potential, but this is all, depending on if he decides to jump into the election of 2024. So that becomes a serious question, but I think that he would do and has the potential to do rather well. Granted that matters in his personal life are going to be supportive of his run. But clearly, I think that without a doubt, granted, there's not some significant event which changes the course of this energy. I think that um, the Republican Party will probably have a hard time running uh, without the influence of Donald Trump. It looks like it's going to be president regardless. Okay, so I think that what you have here is that you're going to have a really interesting contest, a very divisive contest, I believe, potentially between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in 2024.